So my seminar contribution is to give you a brief summary of the In the Footsteps of Trebellius Maximus project, which is a project that found inspiration in October 2019 with the discovery of a lead ingot, a Roman lead ingot that you can see there pictured on the screen, which was found not far from the village of Rossett in Wrexham County Borough, and has led to the first discovery, or the discovery, I should say, of northeast Wales, and possibly actually North Wales's first identified Roman villa. So I'm just going to take you through the research and fieldwork so far, and its implications for our understanding of Roman activity in this part of the world. So just as a bit of kind of background for those of you that may not be familiar, I suppose, with the Roman history or Romano-British history, we're looking at the 1st century AD in kind of the initial sense. So the Emperor Claudius, or the armies under the Emperor Claudius, invaded Britain in AD 43. It took some kind of 40 to 60 years to really, I should say, conquer. That kind of conquest process took a good generation and a half or so to really create what became the province of Roman Britain. So Trebellius Maximus, the chap whose footsteps we've been kind of tracing, I say that quite loosely, was governor of Roman Britain in AD 63 to 69. In the aftermath of the Boudiccan rebellion, he was brought in to try and kind of manage the province in that aftermath. So he's in Britain in a time where the army is still, well, so we thought, trying to conquer North Wales and the northwest of England. It's just before the fortress here at Chester was established by the 2nd Adiutrix Legion, and therefore formed part of the western kind of frontier, I suppose, of Roman Britain. It's a part of Britain that never really became demilitarized. And that's reflected in the known archaeology of the area as well. So for most of northeast Wales and large parts of Cheshire, the majority of our known Roman sites relate to the military or industrial processing in some way. So lots of forts, the fortress obviously here at Chester, lead extraction and mining and processing. Not that many rural settlements or settlements that we would traditionally kind of think of as kind of modest farming settlements. And certainly not lots of nice, big, rich agricultural establishments, Roman villas, like you see across large swathes of southern England. We've got road systems, though, so postulated lines of roads out from Chester in all directions. Some of them have been archaeologically attested. So, for example, the road that goes up to Flint and westwards out towards Holyhead, ultimately, is archaeologically attested. But the one that runs from Chester out towards Minera is kind of a postulated line of a road. Known rural settlements that we do have that have been excavated, as you can see on this image, are far fewer than the military installations that we have and the kind of industrial sites. So whether it's to do with metallurgy or whether it's to do with pottery production or salt extraction, they tend to be far more common and obvious in the archaeological record to date. So the important things, I suppose, to take from that are that there are no known villas until now in this part of the world, yet spot finds, so coin hoards, metal detectorist finds of stray Roman coins, Roman brooches, bits and bobs, actually hint that there's a lot more going on in the sort of the rural spaces than first meets the eye. So when in October 2019, Rob Jones, a local metal detectorist pictured there in the army fatigues, came across this massive great lead ingot, it led to myself and Steve Grenter from Wrexham Museum having a conversation about, okay, well, there is clearly so much going on here, or more going on in this part of Roman Britain at this point in time than we had first perhaps anticipated. So the lead ingot there, you can see Rob had the signature. He sort of dug down to see what it was when he was detecting. He just thought that this is quite significant. So being a fantastic detectorist, he called the Portable Antiquities Scheme Finds Liaison Officer, Susie White, who's based at Wrexham Museum, who then told Steve she's just had a call about something exciting. They then went straight out to site and helped Rob excavate it together with the Clwyd Paris Archaeological Trust. And there you can see Steve from the museum lifting this massive great lead ingot out of the ground. I should say it weighs 63 point something kilos, so about 10 stone, which is why he's looking a little bit red-faced, I suppose. But there it is coming out of the ground, and it's the site of Cobbler's Lane that you can see just off the modern A483 that leads from Chester down towards Wrexham, so just kind of northwest of Rossett. The other site that we're going to be talking about is about a kilometre or two west at Stringer's Lane. But this lead ingot and Trebellius Maximus first became known to us through the inscription that was found on it. So this is the only inscription that we have from Roman Britain that bears Trebellius Maximus's name. So that got the kind of the epigraphy specialists quite excited, and the world of kind of Roman inscriptions really quite excited about this. He was, as I said, sent in to sort things out in the aftermath of the Boudiccan rebellion during the Neronian period. So the implications for this, not only is this kind of the first inscription we've got bearing his name, it tells us that you've got mineral extraction and processing by the Roman state far earlier in kind of our understanding of Roman Britain and this part of Roman Britain than first anticipated. And the levels of extraction and processing have to be fairly sophisticated for this kind of level of activity to be taking place. Remember, this is a period in which the fortress at Chester is not yet founded. They're still campaigning in this area, and we're uncertain as to the level of occupation and control during the Neronian period. The lead isotope analysis, so isotope analysis of the lead within this ingot has been undertaken by Liverpool University. And it's been confirmed that it's a very high probability that it comes from the northeast Wales lead seams. So probably not Halkin itself, but perhaps the seams that run back towards Minera or Freeth. So it's being locally kind of extracted and produced, which therefore has implications to find those processing sites and extraction sites. And Freeth may be one example or one potential contender for that. So considering the potential implications of this rare find, Steve and I got together to consider a wider scale kind of survey and investigation, not just of the area where the pig was found and immediately kind of around it, but more across the landscape of northeast Wales. As part of that, the initial step was to do some geophysical survey of the field in which the pig was found. So we did that in partnership with Archaeological Survey West and Chris Matthews, a former MRes student of ours at Chester. As you can see on the geophysics there, it's rather uninspiring. You've got field drains, services, all sorts of scatters of plough material and detritus that's been dumped on the field. There were a couple of anomalies that we wanted to investigate, and so we did so in September 2020 with generous support from the Roman Society. Started out, and Pauline there as well, PhD student, and Rob the detectorist getting his hands dirty. Started out on a sunny day in September 2020 in partial lockdown, so under sort of COVID protocols, being out on site. It turned into rather an uninspiring excavation, both in terms of the weather and also what we found, i.e. there was nothing really of archaeological significance at all, even within this massive great trench that turned into a swimming pool, which was not particularly pleasant. The clay kind of, the geology meant that it was a really sort of poorly draining area. And therefore kind of we started to wonder, well, how on earth has this massive great heavy lead object just appeared in the middle of nowhere with no kind of recognisable Roman archaeological features or any really around it? So the one thing that we kind of started to think about was how far from the road has this potentially strayed? Is this going to help us narrow down the line of the Roman road? So we've got plans afoot to do much more survey work to try and understand or to spot the line of the Roman road. You're not going to carry it far. Has it fallen off the wagon? Has it been kind of half-inched and dumped somewhere close to the road to be returned to later? And then perhaps the boggy, marshy land has meant that it was unrecoverable. Either way, it demonstrates the fact that we've got mining and processing much earlier than previously thought, and being organised directly by the provincial administration, so by the Roman state and their representative in Britain. It says something about potentially the subjugation of the people in this part of northeast Wales in the pre-Flavian period, and the level of occupation and the advancement of the campaigns. It also tells us about this potential urge or need for lead and silver, perhaps to pay for the reconstruction efforts following the devastation wrought by Boudica and her followers. So all in all, that was quite a nice find. And even though we didn't find anything archaeologically in the field, it sort of, the absence of evidence raises more and more questions. But as part of that, as I mentioned, we wanted to start to look at the broader landscape. And the first phase, or the immediate kind of phase, I suppose, after that excavation, was to look at a field nearby by Stringer's Lane, where we knew of some Roman artefacts turning up through metal detecting. So some Roman coins, a couple of Roman brooches had been recorded on the Portable Antiquities scheme. We'd had reports, unofficial reports, of other items that had not been recorded with the PAS. So Steve managed to get access to the land, track down the landowner and get us access to the land to have a bit of a recce. And we were instantly able to see Roman brick and tile in the plough soil within that field, especially towards one end of this field at Stringer's Lane. We also sort of popped down into the Pulford Brook, which runs just to the south of the field. So just between the kind of the ploughed area here and the green space behind that dips down, and actually you've got the Pulford Brook running there. And you could see washed out material in the side of the brook as well that looked like Roman masonry. So we did some field walking and actually in just sort of small, relatively small area, came up with 25 kilos of ceramic building material, so Roman brick and tile, over 70 sherds of pottery, fragments of painted wall plaster, fragments of Roman flooring, sort of opus signinum, quite posh flooring, all indicative of a high status building. So when we came along to do the geophysics or the magnetometry, it wasn't perhaps that surprising that a Roman building leapt off the page. However, as Chris was processing the data on site on his laptop, I don't think any of us were quite expecting the clarity to which this Roman villa kind of appeared in front of our eyes. So on the geophysics there, you can see in the bottom right-hand corner some kind of straight lines reflecting the kind of the noise around walling, and some other features, some areas of kind of high magnetic susceptibility, some areas of burning potentially, all of which was really, really clear to us, the kind of the trained eye. I think all of us kind of agreed that we'd never seen such clear results, especially not in this part of Wales or even Cheshire for that matter. So there was a building that runs just off a kind of east-west alignment with a nice southerly aspect towards the Pulford Brook, which is that blue line that kind of runs across the bottom of the image. We went back and did an area of high resolution or higher resolution magnetometry over the area where the building was, which is that bottom right-hand corner there. And our interpretation, as you can see, the villa itself, in the bottom right-hand corner, a rectangular sort of building just in front of it to the south, some noise down to the southwest, so possible walling and some high levels of potential industrial kind of level burning, some field systems, trackways, and possible outbuildings as well, suggesting that along with our kind of Roman building, we've got a sort of a complex of potentially agricultural activity. So With the kind permission of the landowner, the Willis family, generous support from Cadw Clwyd Rural Communities Fund, the Roman Research Trust, the University and Wrexham Museum, we were able to undertake excavations last September. So for 3 weeks, we concentrated on what we wanted to concentrate on 4 areas: the villa itself, the rectangular building, the area sort of down towards the brook, as well as a possible outbuilding as Trench 4. Although we kind of, I think, underestimated or overestimated our capacity and ended up focusing mainly on trenches 1, 2 and 3. And what we wanted to do was just kind of evaluate the signatures that we'd had in the geophysics, to ground truth those results, to evaluate the condition and the character of the buried archaeology, including the levels of preservation and survival of artefact and environmental evidence. And in doing so, that would be able to inform kind of strategies for further investigation and management of the site as well. So in 3 very sunny, beautiful, if not actually too hot weeks, we opened up the 3 trenches, and immediately beneath the plough soil, the lines of the Roman walls were kind of clearly visible. The levels of preservation were varying, and levels of survival. So some survived still as some coursing of wall intact, as you can see in the bottom left image, but in the top right image, which is one of the kind of the end rooms of the building, it had been, the walls had disappeared and were only kind of visible, really recognisable through the kind of the ghost outline of the mortar from the foundation levels. So we've got varying methods of construction as well. We're able to sort of think about the way in which they're sourcing stone. So stone from Cheshire, they've got stone from limestone, so from northeast Wales, and they've got sort of a conglomerate from up towards kind of Hope Mountain as well. Suggesting maybe they're taking quite a lot of effort to deliberately create some kind of colouring and patterning in the construction of this. So again, identifying or suggesting that this is a high status building. And so this trench 3, as you can see, a sort of a semi-aerial sort of oblique shot of it here towards the end of the excavations. Almost about a third of the villa, I think, we uncovered here. So you can see the varying levels of survival of the walls. Some walls have been completely robbed out. So, for example, the one across the bottom, where you've just got a big trench, where the wall had been deliberately dismantled. You've got the front corridor to the right of the image. So here you've got a corridor that would have run underneath the section edge, underneath IMI on the edge here, a range of rooms behind it. That would have sort of been room dividers, and then you've got this kind of winged room at the end, and a possible later addition of a wall to the rear of the villa as well. And it's what we call a sort of classic, a winged corridor villa. And these are one of the most common types of villa, if not the most common type of Roman villa in Britain, although obviously not in North Wales or most of Northwest England, where we just don't really get them. So they're very distinguishable by their layout. A couple of other examples on the screen here, variations on a theme, with the geophysics interpretation of R1 in the top right there. They often vary in size and specific layout. Some of them, especially in southern England, develop into quite large palatial villas. They get sort of all sorts of wings and courtyards attached to them and become far more complex over time. The initial evidence from ours suggests that that's not the case. Ours may well have been modified throughout its lifetime, but I don't think it ever really became what we could call palatial. Nonetheless, even though a lot of the villa has been destroyed, it's been ploughed out, it's been robbed away, we have got some evidence of flooring that survives. So the top left image section shows some surviving flooring. We've got evidence of where subdivisions are said of internal space surviving, and also evidence for some timber partitions as well through quite ephemeral post holes. So we can get an idea of the layout of the building itself. We've got, in the kind of demolition layers, we've got box flue tiles, which are big sort of rectangular hollow tiles or that would have been used in hypercore systems to help the kind of the flow of hot air through the underfloor heating system, and a range of ceramics dating from the 2nd century all the way through to the 4th century. So things like Oxfordshire wares, hammerhead mortaria. We've got Samian wares, we've got imported potteries, we've got pottery from elsewhere in Roman Britain, as well as more local kind of Wilderspool wares, I think, as well, and pottery being created at Holt, which is the legionary tile works and pottery, not far away at all. So the people living here are clearly connected to all the sorts of the economic networks that we would expect from an high status agricultural farm, which is effectively what a villa is. We also had 5 really nice coins from Trench 3 alone, most of which are identifiable and date from the 4th century AD. So that kind of suggests that the height, I suppose, of villa occupation in the 4th century, that ties in with what we know about villa use across the rest of Roman Britain. So that's quite nice, including this coin, which is a really nice copper alloy nummus of the House of Constantine. I'm still not sure of where it was minted, but it dates from AD 335 to 341. I mentioned as well about the idea that we've got walls and partitions and internal space. We've got evidence for the reorganisation of that. So this particular rubbed out wall here, I thought was a robber trench. It was kind of that the material was taken at a much later date. But actually, by looking at the stratigraphy of it, I was able to identify that this was actually deliberately demolished during the lifespan of the villa, and then sort of a floor laid over the top of it. And within that demolition cut, we found a coin. In fact, Rob Williams, one of our third years, found the coin that's pictured on the screen, that dates almost perfectly exactly to AD 307. So it's a coin of Constantine I as Caesar. These coins minted from around 306 to 307. This one particularly was minted in London. And so I've been told by someone that specialises in the mint of Constantine at London, was that this was probably November AD 307. So almost exactly 1,714 years ago, giving us a fantastic sort of terminus post quem, or earliest possible date for this wall being deliberately demolished and the reorganisation of the space inside the villa taking place. So that was rather nice, I think, anyway. But otherwise, I suppose the final feature that I'd like to sort of show you about the villa itself is located in the northeast corner, just up here, identified by a rubble spread on the surface, cleaned up around it, peeled back the top layer of rubble, and from that we were able to see some sort of regularity with the way in which the stones were being arranged. On further kind of fertiling, I suppose, investigation, poking, prodding, it became clear that what we were looking at was a gully or possibly a drain running all the way from inside the building outside to the east into the kind of external yard space. Then putting a slot through it in this area here, what became really apparent were the levels of burning inside it. And that confirmed the fact that this is the stoke. So inside that blue area is the stoke for a hypercore system. To the right on the image, to the east, you've got the draw, so to kind of allow oxygen into the fire, that then would have gone through the flue, through the eastern end wall of the villa, under the flooring, into the villa to kind of help circulate the hot air. And the fact that we've got burning tells us that this was fired, it was in use. So hopefully we'll be able to get some nice radiocarbon dates and possibly some environmental kind of samples from that. And so that work's ongoing. So the people are wealthy. Whatever they're farming, which is one of the questions that remains, they're doing quite well out of it. They're not overly extravagant. They're not sort of as palatial as some of the villas in the south of England. But what we've got is a nice winged corridor Roman villa, agricultural based, that would have looked something like the image on the screen. And finding parallels as well is becoming, as I'm doing more research, it's becoming quite apparent. So, for example, this one, the one at Clear Cupboard, the plan at the bottom right there, you can see you've got the flue, the hypercourse flue set up in almost exactly the same sort of space as we've got it on ours. So I know that I've waffled for quite a lot of time, but I'm just going to run through the other two trenches quickly to show you what we found in those. Trench 1, which was the one down by the brick, was there a sort of quite a long, thin evaluation trench to target an area where a lot of the painted plaster, the flooring, the brick and tile was coming from in field walking, which is this kind of gridded image on the screen, and where we had possible walling and structures and next to areas of high intensity burning. Now, where you get lots of nice industrial burning, a proximity to a water source and nice kind of Roman buildings associated with a villa, it's a prime location for a bathhouse. A lot of these houses would have had their own private bathhouse rather than having to go to the public baths. Initial evaluation is that the archaeology in this trench is better preserved, it's more surviving. That's probably because there's more overburden on top. There's a lot more for the plough to get through before it hits the actual archaeology. We've also got a bit of hill wash as it slopes down towards the Pulford brick. So a series of walls heading off in various directions, but that ultimately show a range of rooms running just off north-south, although left to right on the screen here, with some additional later extensions. So one running to the south towards the brick, and possibly one to the east as well, which with the eye of faith, or I think it might have been Steve's Steve's ever hopeful eye, this one down to the bottom, he's hoping there's a curve on it, suggesting an apse. So again, a signature of a bathhouse having a kind of an apsidal end to a building. Just another view of it here, you can see there's some in situ flooring, some opus signinum flooring, which is a crushed tile and lime mortar. Just the phasing of these walls is uncertain, so this is definitely an area for future investigations. We want to expand the trench here for the upcoming season, hopefully this summer, this year, yeah, this summer. The other trench, trench 2, was over that central kind of rectangular building, which was a bit of an anomaly. We weren't even sure if it relates to the villa. It might have been a period on a different alignment. It's actually on a true east-west alignment, whereas the villa is just off east-west. Put a trench in over that, and there it is. The geophysics wasn't lying, I suppose, in that sense. So that was quadranted, like we might do a square barrow or a round barrow or something like that. What became immediately apparent is that this construction material of this was made up of villa building material. So this postdates the use of the villa itself. So we know it's not Roman or very sort of late Roman at the absolute earliest. Within the demolition, we had some I think it was 14th century pottery. So whatever this building is, it dates somewhere between, I would say, probably the 5th century and the 14th century. It looked like it had suffered some quite intensive burning at some point. So some perhaps timber superstructure, timber roof had burnt and carbonised and collapsed inwards. And we've got some really good samples of that to potentially get dendrodated and or radiocarbon dated moving forwards. However, we're still none the wiser as to what it is. Absolutely no idea whatsoever. So that's one area where we do need to do quite a bit more research.